Does this sound familiar? Your association is rolling out new initiatives, launching campaigns, and offering educational opportunities. You're working hard to deliver value to your members. The result? Some members engage, but many tune out, or even worse, never notice. Your carefully crafted messages blend into the noise, leaving you questioning what went wrong. It doesn't have to be this way. Let's talk about storytelling. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Association Amplified podcast. We explore solutions to bridge the member value gap, the biggest threat to associations today. Today, our guest is Breanna Perrelli, creative program and project producer at Worker Bee TV. Welcome, Breanna.
Thanks for having me.
And today we're going to be talking about storytelling and its impact on how you engage with your members. So associations often struggle to really capture the awareness of their audience, and this is where we see engagement numbers really can suffer when there isn't really good storytelling effectively being used. Lack of effective storytelling can really be manifested through if you're really seeing that your association is struggling to get people engaged. It really could often be the way that you're communicating to your members. I mean, as people were really attuned to a storytelling format. There was a great report that I saw recently that 84% of associations are really looking to improve the level of engagement that they're getting out of their members. So I'm quite excited to dig into this today because I think there can be some really great points here that associations can incorporate into their day-to-day. So, Breanna, why do you think that associations struggle to get members to engage with their offerings?
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons why members aren't engaging with association content. So if you've ensured that you have an appropriate communication cadence with them, and you know that you're talking about things that they want to hear, like topics that are relevant to the members, and you know that you're producing that content in formats that make sense to them, whether it makes sense for them to attend lives or it makes sense for them to listen to podcasts, or if they like to see short form video content. If you have all of that down and they still just aren't engaging with your content, then probably what's wrong is the methodology in which you're creating your content. It's the actual structure of what you're saying that isn't appealing to them. It's probably just too dry. It's lacking that story element.
So, Breanna, is there an example that you can pull from where you really seen the impact of not having any aspects of storytelling, and perhaps folks were kind of disappointed with any sort of outcome?
I guess I can think of examples of explainer videos where someone was like, here is all of the information that you need related to this product, but they didn't create an example of what that would mean. Oftentimes, when an association is trying to communicate some specific value proposition to members, they're thinking that, okay, members are busy. We want to get into brass tacks, they're serious people. They're going to say what's everything I need to know, in a list. And I mean, that seems like it's going to be the way to convey all the information you want someone to know is to just put it all out there. But it's actually the opposite. It doesn't set up what the information really means to them. Usually when you're buying something, it's not really about the thing. It's usually about how you're going to feel once you get the thing, or who you're going to be once you get the thing. And that's what storytelling really touches on in a way that delivering raw facts never will.
Yeah, I mean, actually, this is a phenomenal point because, some people may kind of laugh at the concept that it ends up being emotional. But even in business transactions, I mean, science tells us that most purchasing decisions are actually affected on an emotional level. And that if our emotions aren't fulfilled in a way that we want, that the decision actually is altered, right? So that is no different when there's not even necessarily a monetary, decision or financial decision involved, and we're just kind of going about our lives and reacting to the communications around us. If there's essentially no, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, but if there isn't any sort of emotion attached to what we're trying to communicate, then it can really fall flat to the reader or to the viewer.
Yeah, completely. And what you said before about it not even being like a monetary decision. So let's use the news as an example. Like the news is the news. Categorically, it's supposed to be not trying to get you to buy something. It's just saying, here's a piece of information that's relevant to you. So a regular human would have every incentive to be like, let's listen to that. This is created specifically because it's a point of interest for me. And that's the same with the association member, right? Like you're only delivering them information that categorically they should be like excited to receive.
Let me download the news and a bunch of bullet points.
But they don't do that, right? Like your local news station is never like, here's a bunch of bullet points of news. They always, if you went to broadcast school, maybe you don't notice this, but I encourage you next time you watch the news to like really look at the story and think about how it's structured. It's always like, okay, say there's a new policy. They never just say like, this is the policy and these are the parameters. They always start at some guy's house where it's like, Jim was evicted yesterday. And he's like sitting on the porch like, wah, da, 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 da. And it's like, because he was evicted, his family, this and this and this. And you're like, oh, Jim, right? And then they're like, this happened because policy. And then you're like, whoa. And all of a sudden, like, it brings that world of context for you. Whereas if they had delivered you the bullet points of what the policy was, yeah, you could have sat there and extrapolated, like, what could this mean to a person, like, in this variety of contexts? But it makes so much more sense to us as humans because stories are how we're used to digesting information. It makes it so much easier for us to digest information and, you know, to connect emotionally. So that's why they structure news stories in that way.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. All news is told through a storytelling lens, right? That's how and they're doing that on purpose. And it's nothing like devious. It's just that they know you're going to watch longer, read longer if they really do a good job in using storytelling. You know, just a quick tangent, like every good leader out there, if it's in business or politics or where have you, one thing that they have in common is that they're really effective storytellers, right? So just keep that in mind, is that if you want good communication, you want to move the hearts and minds of people, you want them to take action on something, it's like there's this storytelling component and arguably this emotional component, and in some ways they're very interconnected. So storytelling is often associated with big budget entertainment, but associations aren't making blockbuster movies. So why do you think that it's a valuable skill for associations?
Right. So I don't think we should be thinking about story in that context. Like there has to be like a big, like not like a plot, I guess, per se, but I think you should think more every aspect of someone's life they're ascribing narrative to, I guess, to try to like extract some meaning for it. Like stories can be extremely small, I guess. Some of the hottest videos on the internet right now are like, it's TikTok and it's just some woman on her bed, like doing her makeup. And she's like, let me tell you about my day. And you're like, I'm so in, right? Like, I've never been more invested in my life. Please tell me what happened while you were at the grocery store and you met like some mean cashier or something. And like, it just has to be like, even something that small is so, I guess, inherently enticing to our core DNA. Like a little story like that, it doesn't have to be some big overwhelming narrative. But I mean, like, I would still think of like you were saying earlier, like a good leader like puts events into like narrative context, and especially in the course of an for an association, like your annual report or your like year in review is doing just that. It's like, here's everything that happened, but like let's like ascribe like some sort of grander meaning to it, or like a general theme that the course of the year took. I guess the point is that there's stories all around us. We don't have to try so hard.
Yeah, that's true. It's like often we take the story out, and I think the TikTok comment, well, people may like laugh at it. It's like, hey, like there's just no escaping that. Like numerically, there's no escaping that. But often things that go viral, right? And this conversation isn't about social media trends and narrowly focused around young people, but it's actually, if we kind of step back and even do a self-analysis here, often what goes viral, meaning that as an individual, what reaches me stems from, in some cases, in most cases, very low budget, scrappy original sources. So like you're commenting about like the young lady that gets in front of her phone and tells a story about something that was impactful to her. It's not just like the sheer fact that she did that. It's that there is actually people out there that were able to identify and invested in what she had to say it was some sort of, trying experience, and people engage with it. But if she just communicated it without any sort of storytelling, then more than likely people wouldn't have watched it or cared as much, right? So it's like we can take that example and we can really learn something about how we're communicating to members, and perhaps not take the story out of something and look on how we can identify what that story is.
Yeah, the relatability aspect, like a story gives you multiple opportunities to engage with the same person, even though the content might not be so directly relevant to them. Like say you had this member benefit and you were like, okay, here's like the 3 points of this member benefit that could be valuable to you. You have to be somebody actively looking for one of those benefits, and then you'd see the list and you'd be like, yes, that's the benefit of this larger benefit that I wanted to specifically access. That sounds relevant to me. But say if it was a member telling a story and they're talking about like how these benefits made them feel, like you've probably felt that way. And even though the raw content doesn't necessarily appeal to you, you might be drawn in by her describing like other ways that you related to her. Like, oh, maybe she's a parent. And you're like, well, I'm a parent. Like I can relate to the things that she's saying about like preparing the next generation to take part in like the succession plan of this business or something like that. Or she's describing like her career journey and maybe like hearing about that benefit related to how it helps you grow in your career didn't end up being like particularly relevant, but you're like, oh, I know what it's like to start in a new job. I know what it's like to feel like an imposter. Like it's just so many more opportunities to like to get your hooks in, not to be dirty about it, but like yeah, there's just like it's so many more dimensions that you can relate to the content on rather than just being like, well, here's what it is, and like is it particularly relevant to you or not, right?
Yeah, I mean, just if anyone's feels the need that we need to kind of ground out what we're describing here with a specific example, I'll give you this. Is like, have you ever attended a keynote or watched a webinar and you felt like there was a lot being said, but when you walked away, you couldn't really remember what the takeaway was? There was no story there, right? Because this story is going to leave that lasting impact of, again, how you felt really impacts how strongly you walk away with like the lesson that you learned, right? And this is nothing new. I mean, we know humans have been using storytelling to pass down information for thousands of years, right? It's really a natural part of us. So to always just give dense, just raw data information, you're actually asking for someone to work harder to hang on to what you're trying to communicate. So it's way more of an ask on them than opposed to if you try and incorporate storytelling into how you want to convey that, So if anyone's out there has had to put together a talk, I mean, this is really step one, is like, what story am I telling here? And you're thinking about what are the takeaways, and then you go into the detail of what are like the hard facts that I feel like people need to be delivered.
Yeah, like on the surface, it could seem as though, like, say you wanted to convey 3 things, that it would just be faster and easier for someone to memorize that if you just told them the three things. And it's actually the complete opposite. You adding all this other detail like helps them remember it a lot easier. And actually that's like a technique that professional memorizers use. They ascribe a narrative to like the list of things they're trying to remember. And I've heard it done in two ways. Like one way is you're in a room full of objects and you like ascribe like a story to each object and you like walk through the room in your mind palace and you're like, oh, the vase, that is like grandmother's vase, grandmother, this and this and this, and that relates to that. Or it could be a series of rooms where like each room, like it ascribes like a narrative to the list of things that you're trying to remember. And that's so much extra content, but it's so much easier for us to remember that than if you were to just give them what is like actually less information.
So it's funny, Breanna, we're in this state in the, beginning of 2025 is when we record this, and it's AI is everything. Everything is now equipped with AI. There's more users adopting AI, either with their applications or, going onto ChatGPT or something like that. That would inform us that, aren't people just looking for the bullet points everywhere? Where is storytelling now if we can type a question into ChatGPT and it's going to give us a summary in 2 seconds of some complex topic?
Right. Yeah, you would think that, but somehow it's actually the exact opposite, right? Like what's cheap and available to us right now is like generalized, sanitized content with no perspective, because that's what AI is, right? It doesn't have a point of view, right? It just collects from like across the internet and it's like, okay, this is what has like generally like floated to the top or whatever, and like here's what it is with no narrative context. And like in that kind of ecosystem, what's a premium product is perspective, right? Some like real perspective from a real person, and associations, like that's what their real strength has always been, is like it's the group of people that you're trying to get access to. So if anything, like association should be more valuable than ever before, provided that you're actually like making use of like what your real source of value is, right? Which is access to these people. And I would be remiss not to mention that people are saying that like Gen Z is the most like isolated, like online, like generation so far, right? And they're craving connection with people and like ways to like find community, right? And that's what associations have. And like I hate to set it up this way, but your members are like all the flowers in the vase, right? Like you're saying like, look at all of these wonderful people that you could have access to. Like you show their story and you're like helping people build like almost a parasocial connection with them. You're like, I could go to a conference and I could meet like Mabel or whatever. We always say in conference recaps and like brochures, like make lifelong friendships. Like that's something that we write that we're asked to write into every conference recap because it's true. And when we interview people about like what they value most about the association, it's honestly rarely the information they get. They usually place the connections the highest of the things they value. It's like, these are where my relationships are. Like this place contributes to my identity, right? AI doesn't help you contribute to your identity. It's just faceless information, right? It's all about how you relate to others, right? And I think like storytelling is like the entryway to help people like visualize themselves there, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great point where we now live in this time where there's just an overabundance of information. But once again, the associations are in a really strong position to really be the authority, because it's not access to information that is hard, right? It's who do I listen to, is who do I trust, which is the thing that our people are really craving. So the association is well positioned to be in that position, and there's no better tool to accomplish that than the people that are inside your community. Because just to reinforce what you said there, it's like if I want to learn how to build a house, just for example, and I can get some bullet points out of ChatGPT, but but am I really going to value that? Or is it actually just kind of cheap knowledge, not earned knowledge compared to, Mary over there that's built her house with her own two hands? That person made mistakes. They learned from them. They've been there. They've done that. And there's a story behind that. And that's going to resonate a lot more than just spitting out some bullet points and thinking that you've, conquered the world.
Yeah, definitely. Like, for sure, like if you have like something goes wrong in your house, like, and you look up like a YouTube video with all the steps and you're like, okay, like I've got my wrench, like, okay, I guess I can fix it. Like, you're never as secure as you are as if like Uncle Jim is like, oh yeah, that happened to me or whatever, and I did this. Then you just feel like it's so handled.
So what are some simple ways where associations can start incorporating storytelling in their work?
You don't have to think that hard about it. There's probably stories that are already happening with your members that you just have to find. So for example, case studies and success stories are really big, like peer-to-peer learning. You could set up a little form. And usually members are actually pretty excited to share things like that. So you might just ask them to like write in to this email, like if they have a success story that they want to share. And people love that kind of, peer validation. So that'll help you tease out stories that you didn't even know were there. The second is like, think about if you want to set up like a member benefit that you want to communicate, or like an event that you want to communicate. There's no way that someone got to the point of interacting with that and did not have a feeling about it. So just think about how you can ask questions that focus on the specificity and the emotions. So say if you were going to talk about how like you had this course that helped someone with their professional development, and you were going to make a video about that and ask them, oh, how did this course help with your professional development? There's just ways you can frame that to tease out like what the real narrative is, instead of being like, I took the course and then I was more competent. I mean, even that has some like if then, but try to think about like, how did you feel going into the course? How did you feel after the course? And then like all of a sudden the same piece of content is a story, and it's just like way more impactful, right? Another thing you can do is if you have like a piece of content that is trying to explain something with a little bit of a greater amount of detail. Like say you're trying to sell a product and the potential buyer is in like perhaps the like consideration evaluation stage of the journey. You might want to say instead of like here's all the things like product can do for you. Maybe you don't have a story, but you can make a story around it. Like, this is Jim. He had this problem, and the stakes were boss was going to be very angry if he didn't deliver on like XYZ. But thanks to product, he was able to solve XYZ. Like now, Bob was promoted. And just framing the same pieces of information like that makes it far easier for people to digest.
So are there situations where you feel that storytelling might not be the best approach? And how do you think associations decide when to lean into storytelling and when not to?
Oh yeah, there's so many situations where storytelling could just ruin everything. Okay, here's an example that absolutely everyone in the world can probably relate to. If you've ever tried to look up a recipe and been like, okay, I just need to know how many cups of flour are going to go into these cookies. And then someone's like, my grandmother used to make these cookies for us children for the last 20 years and this and that. And it makes me think of home and oh, the chocolate chips like remind me of like rocks on fresh fallen snow. And then like you scroll through like 20 pages of that and you're like, oh, I just need to get to the flour quantity. Like that's how like a piece with extremely high utility or that needs to be used as a resource for members can be like ruined with story elements. So I have an example. So imagine you wanted to promote the idea of like a scholarship. You buried the details on how to apply for that scholarship inside a video that was meant to like to tell the story of like how a young boy like used that scholarship to like eventually like reach like this illustrious career. And those are two different assets, right? Like one is to be used to motivate someone to apply for the scholarship, and the other is like the actual directions to apply. So ideally that video would be served in an ecosystem where, so they had the video and then underneath there's like a collapsible menu that's like, here's how you apply to the scholarship, and like that page is sent out in its like entirety. So like you can either just look and see like, oh, that's how you apply. You don't have to like watch the whole video and be like, oh wait, like in somewhere in the 3rd minute they like say, and then he like used the methodology to apply for the scholarship. Like, can you imagine how irritating that would be if you were like, I got to send this to my daughter so she can apply for the scholarship, and she had to like bookmark that time code in that video. Like, especially if there were like multiple steps to the process and she was like, oh wait, what was the deadline again? Send me that video. Like, that's the most wretched thing I can imagine.
Yeah, burying the CTA isn't necessarily a good strategy.
Yeah, so there's lots of basically the rule of thumb is like if someone needs to ever like reference that, or there's like a specific list of instructions, like story is only going to ruin this. It's not like story doesn't play in like in that scholarship example. Like there could be a story in there, but think about where like those two things need to be separate so you don't ruin the utility of a piece that, you know.
Yeah, probably like a really clean way of giving an example of this is for any associations that also do fundraising. If they're doing fundraising right there, it's like we all know that fundraising is the number one tool in any sort of fundraising is telling a story and incorporating emotion, because why? It's like, it's funny. It's like we all know this information. And we actually, in some level, agree with that. But when you talk about applying it in more areas than what you recognize, even unconsciously, then, you know, perhaps people are surprised by that. But again, go back to the fundraising video. What fundraising video have you seen where they're like, hey, give us $20, send it here, thank you, right? It's like, who's going to respond to that? Who's going to be motivated, moved, right? If you're trying to inspire someone to take action, you're going to have to give them more than that to really motivate them to moving forward. So we don't see fundraising videos like that. But something well executed can be something where it supplies the meaning on why this is important, right? And whatever medium you're doing this in, you have some really clear information that can live alongside it to either like where the action happens, literally like from a UX UI perspective, it's clear where to take action. And you can provide any clarifying detail that can even live outside of, say, like a video, for instance. So going back to what we said before, storytelling is going to really give you that takeaway, but you can support it if needed with reinforcing any sort of important details, again, outside of the story, right? Or supplement that story with further refined detail, say on a web page.
So in a previous episode, we were discussing how much utility a piece of content has, and how that impacts the amount of production value it needs to have. And we plotted 3 types of videos for informing, videos for educating, and videos for inspiration on like a kind of speedometer, a dial, if you will. And what we said was the more utility a piece of content has, the less production value it probably needs. And so we said a piece of content is for informing, it probably doesn't need very much adornment. If it's for educating, it may benefit from some adornment to help illustrate like a complex concept. And if it's for inspiration, like pull out all the stops. And for the most part, if it's like a sometime or rarely, sometimes, always dial, the same framework applies for storytelling. So if it's for inspiration, there probably better be a story there or you got nothing, right? For education, a story may be relevant. Like a story can oftentimes help people like better understand a concept, to like put it into like a place of like specificity, or especially like a case study. And then for inform, more rarely applicable.
Yeah, I think there's often like a long-standing, and you can't blame people, but a long-standing opinion that quality information sent out to people in terms of using video formatting is just going to be like inherently cost prohibitive, right? And I mean, well, starting point is, I mean, a lot of content can actually generate revenues, but that's a whole other thing for another day. But on one end of the spectrum, not everything needs to be the most beautiful piece that you ever put out, because anything less would diminish, your reputation, or, it'll hurt the image that you want to give of your organization. It's just simply not true, right? There are plenty of organizations out there winning with scrappy content. And what I mean by that is that they're really being strategic in where they're choosing to put those dollars so they could put out more material that is useful to people, by not saying, well, we're going to do 3 things that each cost $50,000, and they can take that $150,000 and they can spread it across a whole year. And the way that you navigate that spend properly is, hey, if this is all ask, right, then we know that we need to make this impactful from a storytelling perspective, and we want it to be as visually engaging as possible. So we're just doubling down on the possible impact that this could make to, say, like the viewer. Where on the other end, say if something was completely utilitarian, well, it doesn't need to look like a Hollywood film. I mean, you're just wasting money at that standpoint. The viewer really just cares, if they find it really valuable, is that it's like, give me the information efficiently as possible. And where storytelling could come in, as opposed to it being like a 3-part saga about something that's very utilitarian, is like the storytelling could contextualize the information that you're imparting on someone, right? So going back to what you were saying about how to, people that are very good at memorizing, like the tricks that they give for remembering what objects are in what room, right? It's like if you're teaching someone something, and this isn't foreign to any of us, right? We've all been to school and had a good teacher before, a good professor. So they'll give you the facts, and then they'll kind of summarize and contextualize that information, where it's like, oh yeah, I get it now, right? And it's like, that's the anchor in your mind for what's important. So if we like expand this out to a more practical level, like say your association's putting together a series of courses on your LMS, right? Like put the effort to like have it'd be video for one, and incorporate some sort of bit of video into it. It's just only going to help with the experience. It doesn't need to look like a Hollywood movie, right? You can keep those costs really low. It's just got to be professional, right? And then as far as how do we think about incorporating storytelling, would you agree it's something like make sure that you're hitting the facts that you need to hit, but then you're going to contextualize and summarize that information within some practical narrative to whatever the subject matter is.
When you're looking for stories to tell your members, it's also helpful to think about what kind of stories are going to resonate with your specific membership base. Usually for an association, members are largely fall under some kind of overlapping themes by virtue of the fact that they've selected to be like in like the same industry. They usually have something in common. It could be like political ideologies. It could be like something about like the structure of their families. It could be like what they value and what they prioritize.
It could be personality too. Just, some people are more interested in things and some people are more interested in people.
Yeah, totally. So for example, like there's a lot of associations where the core of the membership is family businesses. And that type of person is usually interested in certain types of stories. Like they like to hear about like dynasty, succession, family conflicts, right? And as soon as you mention something like when my father passed or whatever, all of a sudden it's like there's not a dry eye in the audience, right? Like everyone's so dialed in, like that's the story they've been waiting to hear, right? So if you can hit on like what stories there are already happening in the association, and then like are they also the stories that the membership like deeply desires to hear and engage with? Like that's where you're really going to hit the sweet spot.
Analyzing the psychographics of your audience or just the person across from you is something that we do every day. The difference between being tone deaf to what's going on in the room and actually resonating with the people around you. We're all taking the pulse of who's in the room and what their personality is like. And there's certainly no reason why you wouldn't take that into consideration when thinking about what stories are important to your members.
Yeah, we made it sound so fancy, but honestly, everyone practices this on some level. Like you have a meme and you're like, you know who would love this meme? Marcus, right? But not whoever else or whatever. Like you don't just send everything of interest to everyone on your list, or like you don't tell every story about when you were in the grocery store to like everyone you know. Like you do, everyone knows a little bit about who their audience is and like what they're generally interested in.
Yeah, and to think that different industries, different age groups don't have different cultures is a bit silly in my opinion. You know, like I've worked in and out of different industries over the past couple decades, and I can tell you, industry to industry, there are definitely cultural shifts. So, which should be largely easy for folks, you know, because they're going to be embedded in their industry. They're going to kind of have a good pulse on, say you work in something to do with engineering, right? Some sort of field, say it's aerospace. You know, you're going to have a good sense of what is the pulse on the persona that makes up the bulk of your members. And of course, you know, the big conversation happening right now is how has it evolved since folks that may have joined since the, you know, 80s and 90s to the type of member that joins in the 2000s. There are larger cultural shifts, and that's the big topic that's happening right now is how do we resonate with the new generation of member? If you invest all your time and energy in just resonating with the current member, that's a short road, and you're going to potentially be in a big problem, you know, where every dollar spent on making sure that you're attracting that next generation of members is a solid investment in the future. Not to say that you shouldn't be cognizant of your current members, but obviously it's an extremely important thing of thinking about what is going to resonate, what's important to young people today.
Yeah. I mean, if you're worried about how can we communicate, how can we tell stories that is like relevant to the older generations and the younger generations, even though they might have different values, I think like what you said about it's silly to imagine that certain industries don't have their own culture or their own personality traits of a person that would be in that industry is silly. And I mean, like that is somewhere you can always start, right? Like a scientist always values truth, curiosity, right? A doctor always values like helping, healing, right? Stories like that. A carpenter always values like producing something with their hands, right? Like that's something that you can't get away from. Like you would never be a doctor if you didn't if like healing and helping wasn't a value to you. It's just silly, right?
Yeah, and it probably another example of this that people may be able to relate to directly is going back to some industries are more interested in things and some are more interested in people, and like where the intersection of that happens when creating a story is will either leave that person feeling like they're tone deaf or not. If you're talking to a very objective, pragmatic audience, you don't need to necessarily lean very heavily into emotion, right? Where say like the audience is comprised of caregivers, then it really is about telling a story that really embodies the personal experience and emotion of, say, an individual receiving good care, for instance, right? Or if you wanted to incite some other type of action, perhaps it's what went wrong and what is needed to fix it. But if you lean into that too hard with an audience that's just so heavily interested in just pragmatism and materialism, in a sense, then it could end up feeling like hey, I want a new lasagna recipe, and I'm hearing about how someone, started their day. It's like 3 pages later, we get into the brass tacks. There's definitely a balance to be had there. But I would just caution, like, say your field is related to aerospace. There definitely is room for storytelling, but you just need to be tuned in with your audience. And firstly, I have a lot of trust that people are pretty naturally good at that. But the concept of we need to tell a story is often overlooked for, like we said, the bullet point approach, especially in this stage and age where there seems to be such a great focus on distilling things down to almost like a sterile approach, where we're losing a little bit of what's important, which is the personal experience that we have and the value of listening to people that have been there and seen hardship and overcome and the rest of it.
I'm really glad you mentioned some of those things. I want to kind of circle back and touch on them. Throughout the course of today's discussion, we often equated storytelling with adding emotional elements, but narrative doesn't necessarily mean emotion. It could just mean causality, like if then, like the fact that there was established like conflict, stakes, resolution. That's a story too. It doesn't have to be like, I felt this and I felt that and we all felt things. Like if that's not something that's relevant to your member.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, I think that's a good place for us to end here today. Breanna, thanks so much again for being on the podcast.
Had a great time.
Thanks for spending time with us on Association Amplified. We're here to help your association thrive. So if today's episode sparked any ideas or questions, head over to workerbee.tv to dive deeper. Until next time, take care and keep inspiring your members.